recorded, and the recording as well as a copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be posted to the STGP webpage. All non-presenters have been muted during the presentation portion of the workshop. However, if you have access to the Q&A chat box, we encourage you to use it to ask questions at any point during today's workshop. After SANDAG presents, we'll transition to the Q&A, where we'll respond to all your questions, or at least try to. If we don't have time to respond to all questions during the Q&A, we'll either send a follow-up email or post responses on the STGP webpage. At the end of the presentation, SANDAG will put a link to a quick survey in the chat box. We would appreciate your feedback on the information we provide today, as well as any further information you would like us to provide. Your input will help inform what additional resources we may develop or share. For those agencies joining the workshop via phone, you can email me at zri@sandag.org for the survey link, or wait until this presentation, which includes the survey link, is posted on the STGP webpage. Go to the next slide, Ali. Okay. So like I said, I'm Zach Rivera, project manager of the STGP within SANDAG's Contracts and Grants Department. Joining me in this workshop are my colleagues, Jenny, Ali, and Vanessa, who will each introduce themselves. So I'll turn it over to Jenny first. I think if she's not here.
Zach, Jenny's not in yet.
Okay. Well, let's go to Ali, if you can introduce yourselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Newman, and I'm a grants intern with SANDAG. I just started in the beginning of the year in January, and I actually come from a grants background and also from the agent field. So I'm really happy to be here with you all and be working with SANDAG on STGP.
Thank you, Ali. Yeah, we're very grateful to have Ali on our team to help all things STGP, amongst other things. And next, I'll go to Vanessa. I believe she's on to introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Like Zach said, my name is Vanessa Vasquez. I'm with the SANDAG Strategic Marketing Communications Department, and I'm really excited to be here today for this workshop. Congrats, everyone.
Very good. Thank you, Vanessa. Maybe we'll come back to Jenny a little bit later. And at this time, I suppose what we could do is go to your introductions, or we stop talking and we let you guys talk and introduce yourselves. I was wondering, Arthur, is there a way we can make everyone panelists so that they can introduce themselves?
You have 26 people in your attendees. So if you want to promote all 26 of them, they will have to manage their own mic and cameras going forward.
Okay.
Or you can just allow them to talk, call on them and allow them to talk. And then when they're done, you can just go to the next person.
Okay. Why don't we have, I think it'd be easiest if we just promote all of the panelists.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Thank you. And for all those that you're wondering, Arthur is our resident tech expert who is helping us today with the remote workshop. So thank you, Arthur. Wonderful. So as Arthur's doing that, just want to give you a little introduction on how you'd like to introduce yourselves. To speed things along, I would ask that there be just one person representing your agency. Introduce yourself and members of your team, your staff on the project, and you can go over your titles, your roles in the project. You can give a brief overview of your transportation program, and then talk about whether you received a Section 5310 or C mini grant award, and then a very brief description of your Cycle 11 project or projects. And maybe just speed things along, if we can just do it really quick in about 1 to 2 minutes per agency, that would be great. So let's start with City of Vista. If you're on.
Hi, this is Jessica. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Jessica.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm from the City of Vista. I'm the Management Analyst for Recreation and Community Services. We also have Caitlin Elliott Norgrove, who is the grants writer and the Management Analyst for the City Manager's Office, and Rob Anderson, who is the Operation Manager for Recreation. The program that we are funding is our Out and About program, which helps to transport seniors to and from our senior nutrition program, as well as other areas in our city. And we received Section 5310 funding. And yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think we can go next. We're going right in alphabetical order here, if you couldn't tell. So let's go to Elder Help next.
Hi, this is Anya Dela Cruz with Elder Help. We have our volunteer transportation program to help seniors get to all of their appointments, and it's exciting now that we're seeing the light at the end of the COVID tunnel, thinking about getting them connected with their communities again, doing all the social things that they want to do. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Anya. Next, we can go to FACT. Someone from FACT want to introduce yourselves.
Hey, Zach, this is Arun. I think Bud's on the line and he's going to talk about the FACT projects.
Wonderful. Thanks, Arun.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. This is Bud Anderson, and I'm the Grants Management Analyst for FACT. And we received both SMG and 5310 funding to support our mobility management activities, as well as our Ride FACT program. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but as far as the SDGP program, that's about it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bud. Next, we'll go to Jewish Family Service, or JFS for short, for another acronym. Go for it, JFS.
Hi, thanks. My name is Christiana Gauger. I'm the Senior Director of Nutrition, Aging Services, and Transportation for JFS. On the line, we also have Marilyn Greenblatt, our Director for Transportation, AJ Pacheco, our Transportation Manager. And we've also, I believe we also have folks from our Grants and Finance departments who are on as well. So we're thrilled to be here. This is in support of our Rides and Smiles program for older adults, something that we're excited to have ramp back up post-pandemic, which I'm hoping it's not too soon to say that. And we're here for our Section 5310 and SMG awards. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Christiana. And knock on wood that we're on the other side of COVID-19, hopefully. And, you know, we can resume some sense of normalcy. I'll go next to MTS.
Hey, I'm Dacia Lorenska from MTS. I'm the supervisor of Fairtrains and Minibus here. We applied for 5310 grants and we received money for some vehicles for our paratransit system. That's it.
All right, thanks so much, Vassie. Next up, we have Peninsula Shepherd Center.
Hi, guys. Jean, I'm on. Jean Dirk. Hey, Jean, I'm on. Sorry about that, guys. I had trouble getting.
Okay.
This is Lisa
Okay.
Noakes. I'm the executive director of the Peninsula Shepherd Center, and Jean Durgan, one of our senior board members, is with me as well. Hello, everybody. Looking forward to, as Zach said, coming out of this COVID challenge. Although it was in some ways, and I apologize if people have already said this, but in some ways it was a silver lining for us in all the new ways we could reach out to our folks. We're very excited about the 5310 award and very, very much appreciative of it. We have van service that runs Monday through Friday and Sundays. And then we have volunteer drivers that take our folks within 25 miles of our facility to medical appointments primarily. We also have an excursion program that we use the transportation for, where we take folks all over the peninsula communities for an outing, or a day. We did during COVID use some of our transportation to help folks with vaccinations, but we're excited to keep growing and expanding. And again, thank you guys for your support.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I think we could go next to San Ysidro Health. Is San Ysidro Health on the line?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Go ahead.
This is Sue Schulte. I'm the grant writer at San Ysidro Health, and we also have online Maria Sanchez, who's our Access to Care Manager for PACE. And we're also delighted to be 5310 recipients. What our vans will be used for is our PACE program, a newly opened PACE program in El Cajon. And PACE is an acronym for Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, excuse me. What the vans will be used for is to bring our elderly folks both to the day program at PACE on a daily basis, which we hope with COVID being on the way out, will be opening up again soon, and also to various medical and dental appointments. And one of the things that's really helpful about this grant and to have a dedicated vans to our El Cajon program is that there's a large Arabic speaking population in that area. And so we'll be able to make sure that we have bilingual, drivers and staff because we have dedicated vans in that area. So thank you. And Zachary, thank you for your wonderful support guiding through the grant process. You're so terrific.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Cool. So now we'll go on to St. Madeleine Sophie Center, and I believe Laura is on. I don't know if Laura, if you want to introduce yourself or if there's anybody else from the agency.
Hi, Zachary. Yeah, this is Laura Purdom with St. Madeleine Sophie Center. I am the Administrative and Facilities Manager. We were lucky enough to receive 5310 funding again this year. Our transportation program provides program participants with developmental disabilities transportation to our program, into the community, to job sites all throughout the county of San Diego, and to our site in El Cajon. So thank you again so much for having us and for your continued support of our program and students.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura, for the introduction. Next, we'll go to the ARC of San Diego. I'm wondering if there's anybody from the ARC on the line.
Yes, sir. My name is Kelsey Kopp from the Senior Director of Employment Services for the ARC. And also on the call is Jennifer Navarra, who is the Vice President of Marketing and Development. We have many clients with intellectual and developmental disabilities that work at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, and many of their shifts start before public transportation begins. And so this grant will help us fund transportation to get those folks to work in the early mornings. And we received Section 5310 funding.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And last but not least is Travelers Aid Society of San Diego. Marcy or Adriana, would like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, this is Marcy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So hi, I'm Marcy Roque. I'm the president of Travelers Aid Society of San Diego. Also on the line is Adriana Yimhatby. She is our program manager. We're very happy and excited to have received both SMG and 5310 funding this cycle. SMG funding is specifically for our senior ride program. It's an operating program focused on low-income county of San Diego seniors. It's free to them and provides several different types of transportation options, including access, lift, taxi, vouchers, volunteer drivers, and bus passes. Our other program, which is funded by both 5310 and SMG, is a mobility management program called Ride Finder. And that focuses on information, referrals, travel training, and transit training for the same population. So we're just happy to be part of it, and thanks.
Thank you so much, Marcy. So part of the reason for my doing these, asking you to introduce yourselves is partly so you can get to know one another, but also you can, you know, if you need assistance with your projects, there might be times where other grantees are having similar issues. And so these folks, a lot of whom have been doing this for a while, a lot longer than I've been doing this, are great resources. So I encourage you to reach out to other grantees should you need assistance with your projects. We can go on to the next slide. And before we go to the SANDAG resources, however, I know my supervisor, Jenny Russo, is on the line, and maybe she can introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Happy to have you all here at our successful applicant workshop. So looking forward to sharing what we're up to and help you guys get started on some really great projects. So welcome, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. And I think that concludes all of the SANDAG folks. And I think everyone, all the grantees, soon to be grantees, your successful applicants at this point, I suppose, have introduced yourselves so we can get started with some SANDAG resources. So let me first note some important SANDAG resources from which the information in this workshop was derived. The STGP webpage contains a wealth of resources that is regularly updated, including the Section 5310 and Senior Mini Grant Agreement templates. The SANDAG Program Management Plan, or PMP, is a comprehensive guide on how SANDAG administers the STGP. Further, all competitive grant programs are required to adhere to Board Policy 35. I encourage you to review all these resources. A copy of the Board Policy 35 will be included in your grant agreement. And in this slide, I linked all these resources, and I believe Ali posted links in the chat as well. Go to the next slide. So beyond just the SANDAG resources, there are some local, state, and national resources that I've linked here as well, and these may help you implement your award. So when we go to post these slides, you're more than willing to click on these links and check out these resources. Go to the next slide. So how do I start my project, you ask? The next step in the process is to execute a grant agreement with SANDAG, at which point you'll become a grantee of SANDAG through Cycle 11. As a reminder, there are two components of the Specialized Transportation Grant Program, the Senior Mini Grant Program and the Section 5310 program. The Senior Mini Grant Program is funded through Transnet, the local half-cent sales tax measure. The Section 5310 program is a federal program issued by the FTA, or Federal Transit Administration. The level of Section 53 funding is based on the number of seniors and individuals with disabilities in the region. SANDAG is the designated recipient of Section 5310 funds for the large urbanized area of San Diego, and Section 5310 grantees through SANDAG are considered subrecipients. So hopefully you all know that. That's just more of a refresher for you all. Because of varying program requirements, the grant execution timelines for Senior Mini Grant and Section 5310 projects vary. Cycle 11 Senior Mini Grant projects can start as early as July 1st, 2021. If you're a new grantee through the Senior Mini Grant program, will execute your grant agreement on July 1. If you're a current grantee and have a Cycle 10 Senior Mini Grant Award that is expected to end sometime after July 1, we'll align the start date of your Cycle 11 grant with the completion of your Cycle 10 grant. Moving to Cycle 11 Section 5310 projects, the earliest SANDAG can execute a grant agreement is October 1st, 2021. Similarly, if you do not have a current Section 5310 operating or mobility management project, we'll execute your grant agreement on October 1. If you're a current grantee and have a Cycle 10 Section 5310 operating or mobility management award that is expected to end sometime after October 1, we'll align the start date of your Cycle 11 grant with the completion of your Cycle 10 grant. And then if you are awarded funds for vehicles, which I know some of you are on this call, your grant agreement will be executed October 1st. Once you have executed a grant agreement with SANDAG, you may begin work on your project. For vehicle projects, you may begin operating your awarded vehicles once they have been delivered and accepted by SANDAG, who will verify that all post-delivery requirements are met. But we'll cover vehicle projects a little bit more towards the end of the workshop. So for senior mini grant projects, the latest that you should execute a grant agreement and begin project work is June 30th, 2022. For Section 5310 projects, the corresponding latest date is September 30th, 2022. However, for all Cycle 11 projects, SANDAG highly encourages you to execute a grant agreement and start your projects as soon as possible to provide timely service to the community. The grant term for fully funded operating and mobility management projects is 2 years unless requested otherwise. Projects that were partially awarded and are scalable may have a condensed project schedule, but SANDAG will work with you on specific if this applies to you. Per Board Policy 35, you may request a no-cost time extension of up to 6 months that SANDAG staff can grant. Extension requests beyond 6 months may require approval by the Transportation Committee. I encourage you to review Board Policy 35 for details on project extension requests. And if you think your project would require an extension, please submit your request at least 6 months in advance of when you wish to implement that extension. That way staff has enough time to process, review your request. We'll cover project closeout information towards the end of the workshop, but now I will turn it over to Jenny.
All right, I'll try and keep you guys awake. I know grant agreement stuff is not very exciting, so apologies in advance. So in this slide and the next few upcoming ones, I'll talk about a few of the grant agreement requirements, but if you, I highly encourage you to read the whole grant agreement for provisions that we don't get into. If you're a Section 5310 recipient, it's really long. The senior mini grant one isn't quite so lengthy, but there's a lot of content in there that's written specifically to help you be successful in your grant. So please, please, please take a minute or two to read through them and familiarize yourself with the content. So on here, we have insurance listed. The coverages are general and they're required of grant recipients among all of our grant programs. They are subject to change. Sometimes. I don't imagine we would be changing these anytime soon, but potentially we could, I suppose. So please check your grant agreement for specific information on the coverage that your agency is going to need to provide. SANDAG uses an insurance compliance system called MyCOI. They will send the project manager of your program an email from an account that's called certificate request@mycoisolution.com. And in this email, they'll ask you to introduce who your insurance provider contact is, their email for approval, and for storage of your insurance certificate. MyCOI is going to confirm that your insurance coverage is satisfactory, and they will seek new coverages prior to expiration. So most policies are written for a year, so they're going to follow up with you each year to make sure that you have a current policy on file. If you have any questions or difficulties with the MyCOI process, you can email insurancecompliance@sandag.org and copy Zach, and they'll be sure to get back to you with any questions you might have. Next slide, please. As a grantee, any of your third-party contractors at any tier cannot discriminate on the basis of any protected class or disability. Additionally, grantees and any third-party contractors cannot unlawfully discriminate, harass, or allow harassment against any employee or applicant for employment. To this end, SANDAG requires all grantees to complete the Equal Employment Opportunity Certificate prior to or during the grant execution. Please see your grant agreement for a list of all of the protected classes. Immediately following the grant execution, all grantees are required to begin collecting demographic information from your clients and writers and submitting that data to SANDAG on an annual basis through the Client Demographic Information Form. This information includes a number of clients and writers served, the number of limited English proficient persons served, including their primary languages, and the number of low-income clients or writers served. This data helps SANDAG assess its Title VI program and monitor its subrecipients. As was the case for Cycle 10 projects, there's a provision in the grant agreement for elder abuse reporting applicable to grantees and any third-party contractor at any tier who are mandated reporters. Please review your grant agreement to ensure compliance with the provisions of the Elder Abuse and Dependent Adult Civil Protection Act. Next slide, please. If you intend to use third-party contractors to fulfill some or all of the scope of work of your project, there are several requirements you as the grantee must follow. First, if this applies to your project and a third party was identified in your proposal, you may move forward without any additional third-party contracting requirements. SANDAG may, however, review your third-party contracts during monitoring visits or desk reviews to verify compliance with your grant agreement. If you plan to bring on a third-party contractor to fulfill part of your scope of work, you need to first receive written authorization from SANDAG. Second is competitively award any third-party contract that's over $3,500. 3, execute debarment and suspension certificates demonstrating eligibility to do business with the government. 4, pass down provisions in the grant agreement to the third-party contractor. And 5, acknowledge that you, rather than the third-party contractor, is ultimately responsible for compliance with the laws, regulations in your grant agreement with SANDAG. Further, any grantees engaged in the award or administration of third-party contracts supported with grant funding are required to maintain a written code of conduct or standards of conduct that govern the action of its officers, board members, or agents. SANDAG's established policies concerning potential conflicts of interest apply to grantees as well. Additionally, all grantees are required to maintain accounting records and any other supporting documents for a minimum of 3 years after project closeout and make them available upon request for auditing purposes. Any substantive deviation from your project scope of work must be approved in advance through written agreement between the grantee and SANDAG. If you believe substantive changes are needed, you must immediately notify SANDAG in writing. SANDAG may or may not approve the request based on an evaluation of whether the proposed changes are still consistent with the overall objectives of the STGP and if they would have negatively affected the project ranking during the grant application process. Moreover, per the Audit and Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee recommendations, SANDAG will include an emphasis on performance measures for Cycle 11 grant agreements. This will allow staff to better organize grantee performance data and communicate grantee performance to the ITOC and other stakeholders. SANDAG will be sure to give you advance notice of any changes to reflect this emphasis and technical assistance to report on your project performance. Next slide. All grantees are required to complete and submit the Equal Employment Opportunity Certificate. Section 5310 grantees are also required to sign the Certificate of Non-Discrimination Assurances, which is also referred to as the Certificate of Non-Discrimination Assurances. Additionally, all Section 5310 grantees, whether they have a vehicle project or not, are required to complete the Buy America certificate. All required forms are available on the STGP webpage that Zach showed earlier. If you receive Section 5310 funding, you're required to have a Title VI plan accepted by SANDAG and approved by your governing body before your grant agreement can be executed. We will talk about Title VI plans a little bit more. Grantees with vehicle projects must also create and adhere to a maintenance plan to ensure grant-funded vehicles are maintained at a high level of cleanliness, safety, and mechanical soundness. More on that as well later. Please also be aware that Section 5310 grantees that expend $750,000 or more in federal awards in a fiscal year must have a single audit conducted. If the only federal funds you spend are Section 5310 funds, however, you may choose to have a program-specific audit. Next slide, please. The amount of match you're required to provide is what's stated in your grant agreement. If your project is scaled down due to partial funding, you will need to provide at least the proportionate amount of matching funds. You're encouraged to provide a match consistently over the term of your project at the percentage stated in your grant agreement. Your first invoice must reflect at least the percentage of match proposed. For vehicle projects, since SANDAG purchases vehicles on behalf of grantees, your match will be requested between grant execution and purchase order execution, which will be explained a little bit later. Only allowable costs will be reimbursed. A cost is generally allowable if it is necessary and reasonable for performing the project scope of work under your grant agreement. The table on this slide shows examples of generally allowable and unallowable costs. Vehicle expenses such as fuel, insurance, and maintenance are not eligible for direct reimbursement. However, the IRS provides guidance on an allowable mileage reimbursement rate that captures these costs for reimbursement. The current IRS mileage rate is 56 cents per mile, but please note that the rate is subject to change, especially at the beginning of the new calendar year. Other unallowable costs include automobile stipends for grantee staff and expenses associated with applying for grant funding, fundraising, and lobbying. Additionally, the FTA prohibits Section 5310 funds to be used for transit passes. For more on allowable and unallowable costs, please consult your grant agreement, PMP, and for Section 5310 grantees, Title II of Code of Federal Regulations, Part 200, or it's also called 2 CFR 200, and it'll be listed in your grant agreement. Next slide. Indirect costs are costs that are incurred for common or joint objectives that cannot be readily assigned to a specific grant, contract, or other activity. An indirect cost rate is a mechanism to fairly and conveniently determine what proportion of indirect costs a specific grant, contract, or activity should bear. An indirect cost rate is the ratio between the total indirect expenses and some direct cost base. Examples of typical indirect costs include the costs of operating and maintaining facilities, general administration expenses such as office supplies, salaries for human resources, accounting, and clerical staff. Indirect costs are only reimbursable if you have an approved indirect cost rate. There are two options for a Section 5310 grantee. One option is the 10% de minimis, and the other is a federally negotiated indirect cost rate, or FNICR. The 10% de minimis rate is one that the federal government allows for agencies that have, one, never received a negotiated indirect cost rate, and two, receive less than $35 million in direct federal funding for the fiscal year requested and each fiscal year thereafter. The FNICR is one that has been explicitly audited and approved by a cognizant agency. For more information on indirect cost rates available to Section 5310 grantees, please visit 2 CFR Part 200. There are 3 options for senior mini grant recipients. 1 is the 10% de minimis, 2 is the funicular, or 3 is a rate that's been identified in an indirect cost allocation plan and approved by SANDAG auditors. The indirect cost allocation plan will show your allowable indirect costs divided by your allowable direct costs. For those of you that submitted a proposal and selected and intend to use an indirect cost rate, such as the 10% de minimis, you'll need to complete the indirect cost rate certification form prior to grant execution. If this does not apply to you and you wish to have an indirect cost rate, please contact SANDAG. To reiterate, SANDAG will only reimburse you for expended allowable direct costs as well as allowable indirect costs for grantees that have an approved indirect cost rate. Next slide, please. Here's a brief recap on what you need to do before you can execute a grant agreement with SANDAG. First, review Board Policy 35, the PMP, and your grant agreement. SANDAG encourages you to consult other resources on the STGP webpage or elsewhere as needed. Second, ensure compliance with insurance requirements through MyCOI. Third, communicate with SANDAG to determine your project schedule and budget if you have a partial award. Fourth is sign the Equal Employment Opportunity Certificate. Fifth, complete the indirect cost rate certification form if you select an indirect cost rate in your proposal. And lastly, for Section 5310 grantees, also sign the Certificate of Non-Discrimination Assurances and Buy America certificate, and either complete or update your Title VI plan and submit the resolution from your governing body. I'll turn it over to Zach.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny, for running through the grant agreement requirements. And now I have the pleasure of saying that we have a 5-minute break. So if you need to stretch, noodle grant agreement requirements, or any of that sort, this is your time. So we'll resume in about 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone. This is Allie. Want to welcome you back from your stretch break. I almost feel like a yoga instructor saying that, but this is a successful grants applicant webinar. But before we return back from our break, I do want to remind everyone that you can submit questions into the chat box, and we'll try and answer your questions at the end of our workshop. Thank you. All right. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with the next part of our workshop. So during the first part of the workshop, we discussed program and grant agreement requirements, including necessary steps you need to take to execute a grant agreement with SANDAG. In this portion of the workshop, we'll discuss how to implement your project, how to submit invoices and progress reports to SANDAG, and how SANDAG monitors and reports on your project performance. So SANDAG provides funding on a reimbursement basis for actual and allowable costs incurred during the grant term for non-vehicle project work. Vehicle projects have different reporting requirements, and that will be covered a bit later. As a reminder, you must provide the minimum match amount per your grant agreement for your first invoice and meet the cumulative minimum match percentage for the remainder of the project. To request reimbursement with your grant funds, you must submit an invoice packet that has 5 components. The first component of that invoice packet is an invoice claim form. The second is an expenses detailed by task, a progress report, fourthly, project data, and lastly, backup documentation justifying each expense captured in your invoice. The first 4 components are contained in the invoice packet template, an example of which is available on the STGP webpage. Currently, prior to the start of the grant project, SANDAG staff customizes the standard invoice packet template for each non-vehicle project, adding project-specific details. Staff then provides the customized Excel workbook for the grantees to use for each grant project. SANDAG is now working on developing an online portal where grantees could submit project invoices, data, and compliance information, which may potentially render the Excel invoice packets obsolete. But until that a portal is ready, grantees are expected to use the customized invoice packets provided by SANDAG. Let's discuss the invoice packet components in more depth. Starting with the invoice claim form. If you can please feel free to pull up the invoice packet form from the STGP webpage to follow along. The invoice claim form is the first page of the invoice packet. The top left information under Bill 2 will be pre-filled by SANDAG based on your project. SANDAG will also pre-fill in your billing address and contact information. However, please immediately notify SANDAG if that information changes, and please update the template accordingly. Above Remit To, there is a date field and an invoice number field. For the date, please enter the date the invoice was signed by an authorized representative of your agency. The date should be the same or nearly the same as the date you submit your invoice to SANDAG, and it must be after the end of the reporting period. For the invoice number, please provide a unique number for each invoice. Reporting period costs, indicated by the number 4 on the screen, pull from the breakdown of costs in your task detail sheet, which will be described shortly. The total section will reflect the funds that you have expended through that invoicing period, including the amounts included in the reporting period. The previous period to date section will exclude the amounts included in the reporting period. You will need to copy and paste the totals into the previous period to date for each invoice after the first. The project budget is also included on the invoice claim form so that you can compare. That's to help you so you can compare at each reporting period where you are in relation to the proposed budget. The project budget, along with task descriptions, will be pre-filled by SANDAG. Lastly, the invoice must be signed by an authorized representative of your agency. SANDAG accepts wet and electronic signatures on invoices. One element to the invoice packet is the task detail sheet that we referenced earlier. This sheet allows you to break out your total project cost by task. The first column is the name of each task identified in your proposed budget with 3 categories in each task: salaries, direct costs, and indirect costs. The second column is for your costs for which you are requesting reimbursement. The third column is for the match your agency is contributing. And the fourth is where you will enter your program revenue. Grant funds are eligible to be used toward the net project cost of a project. Net project cost is defined as part of a project that reasonably cannot be financed from revenues generated through the project. The following definitions aid in the understanding of how net project cost is calculated. A project expense is an expense associated with an organization's daily operations, which include the cost necessary to operate, maintain, and manage a transportation service. Project expenses may include wages, office supplies, mileage reimbursement, and more. Project revenue is income that an organization receives from operating a transportation service. Project revenues may include registration fees, other user fees, or fares, including ride-based donations. The net project cost is calculated by subtracting the project revenue from the project expenses. Revenue cannot be used as matching funds for the operating and mobility management projects. And for the progress report, please take your time and let your project shine. Please be as descriptive as possible. Include activities that were completed in the reporting period, as well as future activities. And ensure that there's consistency between your descriptive project narrative and other parts of your invoice packet. For example, if you state that your volunteer drivers provided 100 one-way passenger trips, that should match what is reported in your data report and needs to be supported by your backup documentation as well. Further, SANDAG requires grantees to record the number of complaints their organization has received from clients or the general public against their transportation program during the reporting period. Grantees must discern the nature of the complaint, categorizing it as it relates to one or more of the following subject areas: Americans with Disabilities Act, otherwise known as ADA, Title VI, non-discrimination and/or service quality. Please also check for formatting issues and typos before submitting your progress report to SANDAG. So we at SANDAG, our staff thoroughly reviews each progress report and further communicates the progress of each program to the team and stakeholders. And this is how we identify ways to provide technical assistance to grantees or connect grantees with one another when appropriate. So please remember to be as thorough as possible for your progress reports. The last page of the invoice packet is the data report form, which captures much of your project's quantitative performance information for the reporting period. It's important that you accurately complete this part of the invoice packets. So let me go ahead and go over each metric so you understand what you need to report on. The number of years in service refers to the number of years your transportation program has existed. For the number of vehicles in service, enter the number of vehicles you used in the reporting period for your operating project. Available seats are defined as the number of seats normally available to riders in a vehicle. The total number of available seats is calculated by multiplying the number of seats of the vehicles you operate by the number of vehicle trips provided with those vehicles. A vehicle trip occurs each time a vehicle carrying one or more riders makes a trip from origin to destination. One round trip would be considered 2 vehicle trips. Vehicle revenue hours refers to the total number of hours your vehicles are in service transporting seniors and individuals with disabilities. And period operating cost is the total reimbursable amount plus the required minimum match amount. For example, if you have a senior mini grant operating project and requested reimbursement for $8,000, the period operating cost would be $10,000. It's the $8,000 reimbursable amount plus the 20% minimum match amount, which is $2,000. Please note that the period operating cost factors in the required minimum match, not your. Please note that the period operating cost factors are required in the required minimum match, not your actual match provided. OWPT stands for one-way passenger trip and occurs when one rider makes a one-way trip from origin to destination. A round trip with one rider would be 2 one-way passenger trips. This is slightly different than a vehicle trip, which we'll explain in the next slide. In the bottom right of the data report form, the total cost per passenger, operating cost per revenue, and passenger seat utilization will auto-calculate. For reference, the total cost per passenger is the period operating cost divided by the total number of one-way passenger trips. Similarly, the total cost per passenger is the period operating cost divided by the vehicle revenue hours. Passenger seat utilization is calculated by dividing the total one-way passenger trips by the total number of seats available. The data reporting for vehicle projects is similar but slightly different, and we'll go ahead and cover that a little bit later. So the easiest way to think about a vehicle trip versus a one-way passenger trip is by imagining a bus that leaves the bus yard and runs its route with multiple stops and multiple passengers and then comes back to the yard. The vehicle made 2 trips, out and back. Meanwhile, there were multiple one-way passenger trips. A good way to check if your data reporting is accurate is to verify that the number of OWPTs is equal to or greater than the number of vehicle trips. So you are required to provide backup for any project expense that is included or captured in your invoicing packet. SANDAG highly encourages you to include a general ledger or cover page that itemizes each expense identified by task number and allocated to grant funds, match, or revenue. Please also indicate any indirect costs during the reporting period if you have an approved indirect cost rate. Examples of acceptable backup are payroll reports, receipts, invoices from contracted services, bank statements, or copies of checks, and more. Further, please provide additional justification for any expenses that do not appear related to your project scope of work. Finally, if you use an in-kind contribution as the match, the value of the in-kind contribution should be calculated using the methodology you provided in your project application. Grantees with vehicle projects are required to submit a vehicle and other equipment progress report on a quarterly basis. The progress report form is available on the STGP webpage and consists of 5 sections. I won't go over each one today, but here are a few key points. In section 2, each row represents a grant-funded vehicle. Columns include performance metrics such as vehicle trips and one-way passenger trips. The section also asks you to state the preventative maintenance interval. So you can report if preventative maintenance was performed in the quarter, and if it was, please provide backup documentation. There will be more on vehicle maintenance a little bit later. Section 3 asks for demographic data for the riders you serve. As a reminder, at least 80% of total one-way passenger trips must be for seniors and individuals with disabilities, which is true for operating and vehicle projects. Section 4 requests that grantees report vehicles out of service. Please note that you must contact SANDAG immediately if a vehicle is out of service for more than 3 working days due to loss, damage, or repairs. Invoice and progress reports are due no later than 1 month after the end of the reporting quarter. So for non-vehicle projects, you can submit invoices on a monthly or quarterly basis. For vehicle projects, you must submit a vehicle and other equipment progress report every quarter. Please submit all invoice packets and progress reports in both PDF and Excel formats to grantsdistribution@sandag.org. And for large files, you may use wetransfer.com. It is important that you submit invoices and progress reports that are on time, complete, and free from substantive errors. Failure to do so may lower your project's performance score and impact SANDAG staff ability to report on project performance in a timely manner. For this reason, SANDAG highly encourages you to reach out with any invoice or progress report questions at least 1 week prior to the submittal deadline. So I really want to encourage this. I've been the one who's been doing the invoices for SCGP, but I do check that email daily, just so you know, and so I will be able to get back to you in a timely manner. So finally, grantees should expect payment for accepted invoices about 30 days after initial receipt. Here's a checklist of invoice tips and reminders. So this is invoice tips and reminders for non-vehicle grantees, and we want to encourage you to review this list once the PowerPoint is posted. And here's a checklist of tips and reminders for vehicle reporting. So for those of you on the line that are vehicle grantees, I encourage you to review this slide after the PowerPoint is posted online. If you have been permitted to provide alternative services such as meal delivery, you must report on those services through the Alternative Services Report form, which is available on the STGP webpage as well. The report must be completed and attached to any submitted invoices or progress reports. You must notify SANDAG in writing within 72 hours for any ADA or Title VI related complaints received through your project. Grantees with vehicle projects must also notify SANDAG immediately if vehicles are taken out of service for more than their working days due to loss, damage, or repairs. New to Cycle 11 is that grantees are required to submit at least 1 quality project photograph on a quarterly basis. And also SANDAG also encourages you to submit a writer vignette or testimonial every quarter for SANDAG's marketing and communication efforts. So let me turn it over to Zach to talk about performance monitoring now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allie. So let's see here, performance monitoring. So SANDAG performs grant oversight to ensure the integrity of the grant programs, equitable distribution of their benefit to the region, and adherence to all applicable federal, state, and local laws. So site visits or desk reviews are performed for all grantees with operating or mobility management projects in accordance with the monitoring checklist. They are conducted at the following intervals: 6 months for new projects and annually. Additional site visits or desk reviews may occur as needed. Site visits are performed for vehicle projects in accordance with the vehicle and other equipment inspection form on an annual or biannual basis. SANDAG uses site visits and desk reviews to identify any potential issues and discuss opportunities for improvement. The monitoring checklist and vehicle and other equipment inspection form, which I just referred to, are available on the STGP webpage. SANDAG also monitors project performance through its quarterly status updates, which I'll get to in a little bit. Go to the next slide. Wonderful. So SANDAG staff uses the data gathered through grantee invoices, progress reports, as well as site visits and/or desk reviews to inform its reporting to the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, or ITOC, the SANDAG Transportation Committee, or TC, the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, and other stakeholders as the need arises. Shortly after when invoice and progress reports are due, staff presents project status updates to the ITOC and TC on a quarterly basis. Those reports include two watch lists, which I want to highlight for you. They are the cost efficiency watch list and the schedule watch list. So a project is placed on this cost efficiency watch list if its actual cumulative cost per unit of service exceeds 130% of the proposed cost per unit of service after the 6th month of the project start date. A project is placed on the schedule watch list if the grantee, based on data reported to SANDAG, appears unable to fully draw down grant funds without the approval of an extension request by the Transportation Committee. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so we're at 3:09 and we're going to take another stretch break. And so please, by all means, take a stretch break, get some water, and we'll resume in 5 minutes. All right, so we'll give one more minute, maybe one last great stretch, and we'll begin shortly. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We'll continue on with the workshop. But before we continue, just want to reiterate, like Ali mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box so that we can cover them during the Q&A towards the end of the workshop. And I see we have a couple, or at least one already. So please utilize that if you have any questions. All right, so if we go to the next slide, thank you. So to comply with provisions of the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a subrecipient of Section 5310 funds must complete a Title VI plan. A Title VI plan outlines how an agency will not discriminate on the basis of race, color, or national origin in programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. So a Title VI plan, which is applicable to Section 5310 grantees, includes several key components. So there's the Title VI Notice of Public Rights, Title VI Complaint Form and Procedures, Public Participation Plan, Language Assistance Plan, including what we call the 4-factor analysis, record of transit-related Title VI investigations, complaints, and lawsuits, report of minority representation on planning and advisory bodies that are transit-related, and finally, resolution from your governing body approving of the Title VI plan. So based on what I just mentioned, you might intuit that developing a Title VI plan or undertaking a Title VI plan update could appear to be a daunting process, but fortunately, SANDAG's guide to developing a Title VI plan for FTA subrecipients is a comprehensive tool that includes templates and step-by-step instructions for accessing census data, which is part of the Title VI plan requirement. So SANDAG encourages you to use this as a resource. It is available on the STGP webpage. Go to the next slide. If you are a Section 5310 grantee, your Title VI plan must be accepted by SANDAG and approved by your governing body via a resolution before your grant agreement can be executed. All Section 5310 grantees are also required to update their Title VI plans every 3 years. Draft Title VI plan updates are due to SANDAG for review at least 60 days from when they would lapse. I highly recommend that you see the PMP for a sample Title VI approval schedule and start the Title VI plan process sooner than later. You will be out of compliance with the grant agreement if there's any lapse between plan updates. So SANDAG let's jump now to vehicle projects. So SANDAG uses the CAL Act MBTA Vehicle Purchasing Cooperative, which is federally compliant to purchase all awarded vehicles on behalf of grantees. CAL Act is undergoing a competitive bid process with vehicle vendors and communicated to SANDAG that the new purchasing schedule is expected to be released in July or August. Once it is released, staff will use the vehicle specifications submitted in your vehicle project application to solicit and verify quotes from vehicle vendors. Staff will then confirm quote details and match amounts with you as grantees, execute a grant agreement, and invoice you for the required match amount. Upon receipt of a grantee's cash match, SANDAG will purchase the awarded vehicle or vehicles. So next, you should expect to receive your awarded vehicle or vehicles no later than 6 months after the purchase date. Upon vehicle delivery, SANDAG is required to ensure all contract specifications and post-delivery requirements are met, which involves grantees as well as vehicle vendors. Once SANDAG has accepted your vehicles, SANDAG will notify you, and you should put your vehicles into service shortly thereafter. You should then operate your vehicle or vehicles through the end of their minimum useful life, at which point the vehicle disposition process will be triggered. You can go to the next slide. Wonderful. So all grant-funded vehicles must have a maintenance plan, and they must be maintained in good operating order at a high level of cleanliness, safety, and mechanical soundness. Like I just said, to that end, grantees are required to have a vehicle maintenance plan accepted by SANDAG before you begin operating your Cycle 11 awarded vehicle or vehicles. The vehicle maintenance plan must outline both preventative and routine maintenance and include intervals at which maintenance will be performed. You have discretion to determine the appropriate intervals, but they should be based on factors such as the manufacturer's recommendations, unique operating conditions, and the type of maintenance to be performed. The first element of the vehicle maintenance plan is preventative maintenance. For this element, you must outline the policies and procedures for how your agency services grant-funded vehicles and performs preventative maintenance, consistent with the vehicle manufacturer's recommendations. For example, a typical maintenance element would require an oil change and basic safety inspections to be performed at every 5,000 miles or 3 months, whichever comes first. As a part of preventative maintenance, you should also outline how you conduct pre-trip and post-trip inspections, ensure the maintenance of ADA and other equipment, and perform routine cleaning. Finally, your vehicle maintenance plan must describe your procedures for keeping maintenance records and logs, including for servicing requirements, repair work, pre and post trip audits, and routine cleaning. I think that does it in terms of vehicle maintenance plans. I'll jump now to talk about project closeout. So for non-vehicle projects, project closeout is triggered when all funds have been expended or the grant agreement terminates, whichever occurs first. Vehicle projects close out upon completion of the vehicle disposition and or termination of the grant agreement. Upon project closeout, SANDAG will send a letter detailing any pending items such as outstanding invoices, and will also notify you of continued grantee responsibilities such as record retention. And at this point, before we go to your questions and answers, let me turn it over to my colleague, Vanessa, to discuss how to communicate and market your soon to be very successful projects. So I'll turn it over to Vanessa.
Thanks, Zach. Hi, and good afternoon again. Again, like I shared earlier, my name is Vanessa Vasquez, and I'm a marketing analyst for the Strategic Marketing Department here at SANDAG. I want to first again congratulate you all on being Cycle 11 successful applicants and share how important your projects are for the San Diego region. So I'll only be taking a couple minutes of your time to share some important reminders as SANDAG Transnet recipients to keep in mind as you plan to execute your upcoming projects, along with sharing some resources and tools available to implement your Cycle 11 award successfully. So let's see here. So grant agreement requirements. So to kick things off, while we know much has changed due to COVID, we understand that riders are still in need of transportation to those, critical medical appointments or even to a vaccination appointment. So keeping that in mind, I want to take a moment and chat about capturing these trips through photos. This is really one way to drive home the service you're providing. As you see here, I added a couple of photos here and see these are just great shots and just really resonate with people. So we want to encourage you to take advantage, capture these essential trips with a photo. If you have opportunities to capture a testimonial and they're willing, we absolutely encourage you to do so. We love to use these in our newsletters to promote the program. We love to use them on social, marketing materials, the project website, and so much more. And these are just great tools to help you promote the great work you do. So again, we love these photos, and if you guys have a chance to take them, we're all about accepting them. I do have a few tips. So I understand that not everyone's going to have those high-tech cameras available when they are, out and about providing these trips. So just simple tips from, like, if it's a daytime, there's no need to use flash. You want to stick to outdoor settings. So just like these two photos I have here, these are great natural lighting from the outside. So anytime you're outside, that light is sufficient. Or even just a simple of holding your phone, since most people are going to use their smartphone, just want to hold it horizontal to capture a great photo. These, again, when they're horizontal, they can be used on those marketing materials I mentioned, social media, our website, and much more. So right before I get off to this topic about photos, I just want to share a reminder. We must have permission from riders being photographed to use their photos. So we do have a testimonial and photo and release form that will be made available on the SDGP website in English and in Spanish. So leading after this workshop, we'll make sure to put those resources up on that page for you guys to download and make sure to have available. Next slide. Thank you. So I just kind of want to quickly talk about logos. Let's see here. So we do have the, for the communication guidelines, we do have a couple Transnet signage and guide and resources for grant recipients. So as a part of your agreement, you must use the SANDAG and Transnet logos, which I have up here on the screen, in all of your media and communication materials, which do require approval from SANDAG. So if you are preparing any sort of digital printed materials or anything of that nature, we do ask that you share that with SANDAG with at least 5 business days in advance for staff to review, certainly to avoid you printing and having to reprint again if changes are necessary. So for like digital files and logos available, you should use color materials and on the black and white on white materials. So just as you see them here, that's how they should look as well. Also, it's very important that we check with SANDAG staff before using any of the logos in alternative colors. So as these are photographed here, these is how they should look. So the SANDAG logo should be first, and then the Transnet logo immediately following to the right of that logo. And if you are ever in doubt, we ask you to reach out. We're happy to, provide any guidance, provide any side variations, depending on where you may use these, like on printed poster boards or anything of that nature. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to accommodate and provide any files needed. Next slide, please. Thanks. Alrighty. So the fun topic, social media. Well, we understand that not everyone may be so engaged with social media. SANDAG definitely does have a presence on social media. So we do have a Facebook page, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, which I've provided all of our handles for. Those are really important. I really want you guys to just take a moment and check those out, capture them, because we'd love for you to post, share anything related to your cycle and your funding. So if you capture a photo, make sure to tag us on whatever channel you guys do have, and we'd love to reshare them. So it's all about getting exposure and really celebrating what you're doing for the community. And also it's important if you're going to tag us to also include the relevant hashtags, which I included there. So we have Transnet SD, and I did forget one more. So you could also include the hashtag of SANDAG. So Transnet SD hashtag, and then SANDAG hashtag as well. And just a couple of reminders, if you do decide to share on social media, I do have these little simple posts that you could just insert your program name here. So you would insert your program name is supported by SANDAG as a part of Transnet Senior Mini Grant Program, or another alternative is, of course, program name is supported by SANDAG as a part of FTA Section 5310 program, just to make sure that it's represented correctly and we get the recognition, you get the recognition on social media. And just one last thing I wanted to talk about. I'm not sure how often or how likely, if you receive any press or media inquiries, we are happy to support these events, whether if we do return to in-person events someday. So just a reminder, if you receive any inquiries of any shape or form, we would love to know. You can share this information with our PIO email address I've provided, or you can contact that number as well. That will put you in contact with Jessica Gonzalez, which is our media inquiries contact here at SANDAG. She'll make sure that we're aware the necessary parties are involved. If it's a big event, we'll be sure to be there to support as well. So I do want to make sure that I covered everything. Of course, congrats again. If there are any questions, I'm free right for a couple minutes to answer anything that I may have missed or you guys are interested on. Otherwise, we do have the Q&A session scheduled after. So if there's no questions, I'll be back to you, Zach.
Awesome. Thank you, Vanessa. We're a year plus into remote working and I have trouble with mute and unmute. So it goes. So now we'll turn it over to you for any questions. To reiterate, to ask a question, you can enter your question in the chat box. I think we've gotten a couple already. Use the raise your hand feature in Zoom or dial *9. As a reminder, this workshop is being recorded and a copy of these slides and the recording will be made available online. We also added a link to a quick survey in the chat. We'll do that and would appreciate your feedback. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to Allie to see what kind of questions we have from you all.
Thank you, Zach. I'll go ahead and pull up our questions document now. Okay. So, so first question is there an internal contact list that gets circulated? And I'll direct that question to you, Zach.
Great, thanks. So SANDAG will follow up with all of you to see if you'd be willing to share your contact information. And if you are willing to share, then we would be more than happy to circulate contact information so that you guys can connect with one another and use each other as resources to implement your projects. So that'll be a follow-up item.
Great. So the next question is regarding the alternative services form. This had a few questions wrapped in one. They asked if food deliveries can be considered as alternative services, or if you have to have have to provide actual rides as part of the service?
Okay, so first of all, let me start with giving a description, a common definition of alternative services. So alternative services are trips that are provided for such things as meal delivery, prescription drop-off, those sorts of things. These were allowances made during COVID-19, given the unique circumstances brought about by COVID-19. And they can continue so long as they don't interfere with the traditional one-way passenger trip kind of type service. So this would apply if you included alternative services as part of your proposal and you provide alternative services, you need to report on those services via the alternative service report form, which is available on the STGP webpage. And they can be substituted as one-way passenger trips and should be separated out in any invoices that you submit. I hope that answers that question thoroughly.
Yes, and there was another question regarding that. So I think we can just clarify for this person regarding the alternative service plans and forms that were written as contract addendums for cycle 10. Are they presumed to be included in cycle 11? So I thought we could just clarify it using that language a little bit more. Thanks.
Yeah, so they would, those addendums, those amendments were specific to cycle 10 agreements. So if you included alternative services part of your cycle 11 proposal, and we execute a grant agreement for those alternative services, you can then proceed to perform alternative services. If you did not propose that, then I would encourage you to talk to SANDAG and see if we need to amend the contract, your grant agreement. So hopefully that helps to clarify.
Thank you, Zach. Very helpful. So another question is, are the requirements for indirect costs different for cycle 11 than they were for cycle 10?
And no, not really. So that's the short answer. The longer answer is that we'll be looking at indirect costs a little bit more closely. So if you have an indirect cost rate, then we'll allow indirect costs. If you do not have an approved indirect cost rate, then we will not approve indirect cost rates.
Great. And so under another question is, under the 5310 award, is there a renewal approval process, or does the vehicle award continue through the useful life of the vehicle, assuming the compliance to the agreement is maintained throughout?
Yeah, all right. So this is something that we're working on. So right now we're working on vehicle disposition procedures, so that's ongoing. But generally how it works is that you will, if you have a vehicle project, you're required to operate the vehicle through the end of the minimal useful life, which for minivans, the smaller vehicles is 4 years, for cutaway vehicles, for larger buses is 5 years. And the useful life clock, so to speak, begins when you first put the vehicles into service. So at the end of the minimum useful life, there are a couple of options. So first, we could potentially assign the vehicles to you as the grantee, at which point the grant agreement would be terminated. That would be the case if the vehicle is worth less than $5,000, if the fair market value is less than $5,000. Another way, you could also return it to SANDAG, the vehicle, and if it's at any value, if it's $5,000 or less or more, then we can handle the disposition process. And just to clarify for everyone, that $5,000 threshold is an FTA requirement. That's what we have to, any amount over 5,000, we have to make sure we compensate the FTA for their federal share. So if it's less than $5,000, there's no obligation to the FTA, but if it's greater than 5,000, there could be. And so those are the primary ways that we handle vehicle disposition. And then one other thing I should mention too is if your vehicle is just keeps rocking and rolling, and you want to continue it past its useful life, you can do so as long as it's within the grant agreement term. So it's a minimum useful life, it's not a maximum useful life.
Thank you, Zach.
And one other thing is the procedures that I mentioned will clearly articulate what I just said too. So stay tuned for that.
Great. Thank you, Zach. And the last question is just about referencing all of the great info that we had in our webinar today, or our workshop today. They asked if this information will be outlined for them to serve as a reference.
Yes, always. So this information, this PowerPoint, the resources that I mentioned will be posted on the Specialized Transportation Grant Program webpage. That webpage will be updated pretty regularly. So, and we want to have that resources available to you so that you can really succeed in your projects and implement your projects. So the PowerPoint, any communication guidelines. I'm also looking to see how we can post instructions to use WeTransfer for invoices, just all these different things. We'll post in one kind of consolidated place, and so that you have access to those resources. And if you have questions about those resources, please, by all means, reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. That wraps up our questions portion, I believe. I don't see any hands raised right there, but thank you, everyone.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
One other quick note before we wrap up, and Allie, if there's any raised hands or while I'm talking right now, please shout out to me so that we can take any other questions. But as a reminder, if you have any more questions that you think of maybe after this workshop, please, I would encourage you to review your grant agreement, which we'll be sending soon, and a template of which is on the STGP webpage. Also encourage you to review the guidance in the PMP. It's very thorough, so I encourage you to review that. And then use other SANDAG or other resources I just mentioned. And as always, please reach out. So are there any other questions, Allie, or other raised hands?
No, I'm not seeing any.
Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to give 15 minutes back to you all to improve mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. And I really appreciate you attending this workshop and for all that you do in our community, especially, I have to say, during COVID-19, which has been nothing short of a Herculean task for all of you, I know. So with that, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, SANDAG.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It was great. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.